Welcome to the Sacred Window podcast. Here, we look closely at the intersections of the postpartum window, the Ayurvedic perspective on health and healing, and the universal mother principles that are the keys to giving and receiving effective care. Hello, I'm Christine Eck. I'll be taking you through interviews with professionals who are making a profound difference in the lives of their clients, conversations with individuals brave enough to share their stories of vulnerability as a way to lift up others, and my own journey through birth, parenting, caregiving, and building a conscious business. We are here to honor the sacred windows, the profound transitions in life that give it all meaning. Welcome to the conversation.
And I will never be the same again.
Welcome to the Sacred Window podcast. Today, I'm so happy to welcome Natalie Elliot to our show. Natalie and I are going to have a conversation about cycle tracking in postpartum. Natalie is a women's health practitioner. She hosts her own podcast called the Moon Baby Magic Podcast. She supports healing menstrual cycle challenges, harmonizing hormones, building a relationship with the womb that is informed, intentional, and sacred. And her approach is rooted in physiology and emotional healing, but also something that is about remembering what it means to live in rhythm with our bodies, with the earth. And Natalie, I would love to invite you to further elaborate on who you are, but also where this calling comes from to support other people in this.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for having me, Christine. I'm really, really happy to be here with you and get into this really important conversation. Yeah, gosh, such a beautiful question. As you mentioned with my bio, my work is as a women's health practitioner. So seeing one-on-one clients, supporting them with anything from the cycle tracking. I almost said the basics of cycle tracking, but as we'll see, it's not quite always super basic. And all the way to hormonal challenges, whether that's fertility, period pain, kind of anything in the realm of that, from a traditional Chinese medicine meets like holistic and spiritual psychosomatic lens. So I got into this work because of my own cycle challenges. A little backstory is that there was a time in my life when I was really severely undernourished. In my late teens and early 20s, where I was on this vegan diet that wasn't serving me. And I had been on it for about 9 years and was having just crazy menstrual symptoms, everything from period pain that landed me in the ER to feeling like I was bipolar in the week before my period because of my crazy mood swings. And just this like constant chronic exhaustion and inability to deal with things. I was having really long cycles, really painful periods. And it wasn't until I decided enough was enough and went to see a fertility awareness method practitioner. And I actually didn't even go to her initially for tracking my cycle. That wasn't like on my radar. I went to her because she was also an acupuncturist, and I was starting to explore more alternative ways of healing my hormonal challenges outside of the medical system. And she was like, well, like I can help you. We can do some acupuncture. But there's two things. First, we're going to have to start tracking your cycle to see what's going on. And she was a FAM instructor, so she did that with me. And she was like, and also you have to start eating meat. And I was super triggered by that at the time. So I was this like skinny yoga vegan girl. And anyways, once we started tracking my cycle, we found out I wasn't ovulating. And I don't know how long I hadn't been ovulating, but I didn't know that until I started tracking my cycle. And that is what gave me the willingness to begin changing my diet, changing my lifestyle, developing a relationship with my womb, and actually like treating my body like it was a female body that required deep nourishment and attention. And so from there, I got kind of obsessed with all things womb cycle tracking and began talking everyone's ear off of it, to the point that I was giving these like free mini cycle sessions to other women at the yoga studio. And eventually turned into a career. I took courses, I got mentors. I work really closely with my mentor, Kristen Hauser now, who's a traditional Chinese medicine fertility practitioner. And now it's what I do full time, and I'm extremely passionate about it. because I honestly think it saved my life, because I would have had no idea what was going on if I hadn't simply tracked my cycle.
Oh gosh, yeah, and it comes down to it's like almost so obvious, but we're not taught to even consider it. And I think
Yeah.
that is like the major disconnect. We have like all these sort of ideas and fads and opinions and sort of ways
Mm.
of eating that are just kind of out there, and we take in this information, but when it's not rooted in deeply knowing ourself through our cycle, our digestion, how that impacts all the different body systems, when it's rooted in more of like this belief level than this actual relationship
Mm.
level with our
Mm.
body, it can totally miss the mark and be causing us harm in ways that we're not even aware of because we're not willing to kind of do that work of getting to know.
Yeah, I love what you said. It reminds me of a quote. I can't remember where this quote is from, but I heard someone once when I was kind of transitioning out of that vegan eating world, which was, you can't spiritually bypass your biology. And
Yeah.
it's like, we can have, like you said, we can have all these ideologies, but like, what does our female body actually need? And I think that's what's so beautiful about the work I do now and about just womb work and cycle work in general, is that it is spiritual, but it's also deeply physiological.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And ancient systems of medicine, which I just have the most respect for, and Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine being examples of those that are actually so synchronous. And I would venture to say, like, you know, many ancient systems of medicine are rooted in similar philosophies of really understanding how the human body is in relationship with nature and the elements, and how we can navigate through finding balance for what's coming up for each individual person versus just making assumptions and and sort of handling symptoms versus really creating a balanced foundation. So,
Yeah.
I think what's so compelling about learning about our cycle and developing a relationship with our cycle is that to me, it feels like very mysterious in a way. Like, yes, it is biological, but there's something very subtle and unknown. It's like there's so many things happening within me on the chemical level and the subtle level, and this like tying it to like the rhythms of the earth and the moon. It's so beautifully magical, and yet like almost elusive in how we can really understand. For some people, I think things and changes and parts of their cycle are very clear and obvious. And for some people, it's not. It's much more
Yeah.
subtle and it's a little harder to track. I'm
Yes.
curious, like, what your experience was when you started to learn and connect with your own.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think at first, the first thing that I did was I got really obsessed with my period. So, like, that was the part of the cycle that I just focused on. And I think actually a lot of women do a similar thing, because there's even this like subtle teaching that we get that like our cycle is just our period. And women will say, like, oh, I'm on my cycle. And I'm often correcting women now and saying, like, you're always on your cycle. Like, are you menstruating? And so I started with that. I started with just like, oh, can I like try to figure out when my period is going to come? And so it started as simple as that, as like noticing, that when my bleed was going to arrive. But what I quickly found, this was before I did any fertility awareness method education, was that I couldn't accurately predict when my bleed would arrive, which I know now is because if your ovulation is delayed, which mine was because of my diet, ovulation can be delayed because of diet, because of stress, because of illness, because of travel, lack of sleep. There's a lot of reasons ovulation can be delayed. And so, assuming that your cycle is going to be around 28 days and your period's going to come exactly 28 days after, doesn't take into account the different times that we all might ovulate. And so when I started fertility awareness method tracking and I was trying to track ovulation, I was very confused. It was very mysterious to me. It's like, how do I know I'm ovulating? What does this cervical fluid mean? What do you mean I'm supposed to check the like position of my cervix? Like, how do I even do that? And I think many women, when they get started in tracking in this very particular way, um, it's not going to make sense right away. And so actually that's why it's recommended that you need to do like at least 6 months before you rely on that as like a method if you're going to use it for whether it's conception or contraception. Because your first few cycles, you're not going to be able to make sense of it. They're going to be a little bit wonky because you're not going to remember to take your temperature at the same time every day. You're not going to know what cervical fluid means you're fertile and which whatever. You might not be able to tell the difference between what's cervical fluid and what's just like vaginal secretions yet. And so it is a steep learning curve at the beginning, but once you get it, you kind of get it. And you can then start to understand the different patterns and be able to, yeah, feel a little more confident in it moving forward. But if you're someone who's dealing with irregular cycles, I had a woman reach out to me yesterday and say, I have PCOS and I can't figure out my chart. Like that's a common pattern where like you're going to have these ups and downs and your body's trying to get up the energy to ovulate, but it isn't quite there yet. And so it is a little confusing in those cases.
Yeah, and so worth it to put in the time to really discover that, because then like you said, like once you get it, you kind of just have it and you understand and you know, and even if things change, you understand what those different changes indicate and
Mhm.
how to bring it back potentially to a rhythm that is, you know,
Yeah.
really characteristic of you and your cycle when you're in a healthy place.
Exactly. And yeah, what I want to add quickly to that is like it's a diagnostic tool that you can use yourself. Like that's why I think it's so important that when when women come to me, whether it's one-on-one or something else, it's like, well, let's get this educational piece in because then you can learn to read your chart and know what's up. For example, if you have a chart and you ovulate later that month, you're like, huh, what was going on? What does my body need? Do I need more liver support to transform yin to yang to get to ovulation? My temperatures were a little lower this month. What's going on with my basal body temperature? Lower temperatures could mean your thyroid needs some support. So there's all these little things that you can learn on what, like how your body, it's like learning to read the language of your body when you do this charting practice. It's really beautiful.
It is really beautiful. And, I think that, it's when we are, going through the cycle and we have like that monthly bleed and like that is like easier to kind of navigate. But I want to like move into the topic of cycle tracking and postpartum because
Mhm.
this, of course, is a time where everything that's going on in the body is like recalibrating and also changing. And we're, not, we don't have the same obvious like cycle. And, I got pretty skilled at tracking my cycle, when I was first trying to conceive. And like we had that, like I figured out how to do it and I really appreciated having that knowledge. But postpartum, it's like the same things are not happening, or maybe
Yeah.
they are, but they're like you don't have that monthly bleed to like tell you what's going on or like be that marker point. So what does
Yeah.
this look like and how can we start to track in postpartum?
Yeah, totally. Gosh, that's such an important topic. So the first thing I will say that I think is just like the hallmark of what every postpartum woman needs to know, if she's practicing fertility awareness method, especially if she's using it to prevent a second pregnancy right away, which I think is kind of where most women are coming from at that point. You will ovulate before you bleed. Like that's kind of what I was getting at with, focusing on the bleed is beautiful, but you actually like have to focus on ovulation first because ovulation is what then creates the fact that you have a period when you don't get pregnant. You don't have a period if you don't ovulate. You might have like a breakthrough bleed. But in the postpartum time, you're going to ovulate before you have your period. So why I want to share that is because it's not reliable to just wait until you get your period back to start tracking. You actually have to start looking for fertility signs. And so there's a different timeline for many, many women, like some women, if they're not exclusively breastfeeding, might get their period back within like 6 to 10 weeks, even as early as that. If you are exclusively breastfeeding and you're spending a lot of time with your baby, and so your prolactin is really high and your oxytocin is really high, that's going to suppress estrogen and progesterone. And so because of that, some women who are exclusively breastfeeding might not get their period back for up to a year, even like 16 months. The general kind of like TCM framework is between 4 and 16 months is like a good time to get your cycle back. However, that also is going to vary so much depending on the woman, and there can be like a wide range of normal. The other thing to know is that temperature tracking can be a little bit tricky. So fertility awareness method uses temperature tracking, your basal body temperature. It uses cervical fluid observations, and there's an optional sign, which is checking the position of your cervix, whether it's high or low. So high meaning you're fertile, low meaning you're not as fertile. Cervical fluid kind of follows a pattern of going from like sticky to creamy to egg white when you're very fertile. And your basal body temperature is something that you take in the morning before you do anything else. So before you drink water, before you get up, before you ideally like talk to your partner in bed, and you just take that temperature. It's going to spike after you ovulate. So when we think about that, the basal body temperature won't spike until after you ovulate. Most postpartum women need to be focusing on cervical fluid observations. So that's like the really key thing about cycle tracking in the postpartum before you've gotten your first cycle back. So that kind of looks like after birth, after you finish passing the lochia, after you finish bleeding, and that all kind of slows down. Postpartum is, of course, considered in TCM like a state of yin. It's like very yin. And so you are somewhat blood deficient, and you're like working on building back up that blood and building back up that yin. And building up yin in blood is what is able to bring your cycle back. So if we think about that from a TCM lens, yin has to reach a certain point to then transform into yang, which is ovulation. We would say estrogen has to reach a certain threshold to trigger the LH surge, which then brings us into the luteal phase and ovulation. So most women are going to notice that they have quite a bit of time of like dry days, of feeling kind of like dry in general, needing to really support their yin and all of that in the postpartum time. But eventually there's going to start to be some sort of pattern. So whether that's like a little bit of cervical fluid, or maybe you notice like this sort of sticky type, or whatever it is, you're going to start to notice something. And the key to cycle tracking in the postpartum without like a ton of obvious signs is to notice when the pattern starts to change. So in Toni Weschler's book, Taking Charge of Your Fertility, which is like the Bible of all this stuff, she says that she calls it a basic infertile pattern. So whatever pattern you're having for most of your postpartum, whether it's just like a little bit of sticky, gummy type looking cervical fluid, or whether it's just a little bit of wetness in your undies all the time, you're going to want to notice when that changes to something else. And when that changes to something else, so maybe you're noticing you are totally dry, and then you start to notice this like creamy like consistency at like 6 months postpartum, you're going to want to consider yourself fertile then, and begin, taking precautions if you're going to be lovemaking, if you're going to be intimate with your partner, because you do want to consider yourself fertile when the basic infertile pattern shifts to something different. Eventually you can start taking your temperatures, and a great way for postpartum moms to do that is to use like some sort of device like a temp drop. The temp drop is a wearable wristband, so you don't have to like, not be disturbed by anyone for 10 minutes by taking your temperature, which is really hard for new moms and moms in general. You can, if you want, still try doing it the old-fashioned way with just a BBT thermometer. And you would just do that after your longest stretch of sleep. So whenever that is, but knowing that the time that you take the temperature is going to change it a little bit. So if you take it 2 hours later one day, it's going to be a little higher. And if you're new to charting, you might mistake that jump for an ovulation jump. So cervical fluid is really like the most key thing. And then once you ovulate, you'll get your period in about 2 weeks. And from there, what women should know is that their cycle isn't going to be super regular right away, and to not expect that. And so you want to continue your tracking of your cervical fluid and start your tracking of temperatures, and maybe use something like LH strips if you really want to be sure, because you're going to have a few irregular cycles. It's sort of like a girl coming into puberty for the first time, like her body's figuring out how to cycle and her ovaries are figuring out what to do. It's like that when you come into your postpartum again. So if there's like a 60-day cycle, the first round, like I don't think women need to be worried about that because their body's coming back into harmony.
How are you sharing your gifts and passion for caregiving with others? In a world where education and awareness around the postpartum window is lacking or missing from our modern systems, we have a profound opportunity to shift that paradigm. You may be a few simple offerings away from making a truly impactful difference in the lives of mothers and families in your community. We are here to support your journey in the ways that work best for you. Schedule a conscious care strategy session to meet one-on-one with me, and let's identify the right next step for you to begin a path of conscious care for new families that fits your life and your needs. Visit www.sacredwindowstudies.com/strategy-session to schedule a time that works best for you. That's www.sacredwindowstudies.com/strategy-session. I love that. It's like really just a good reminder to just give it the time that it needs, and how important it is to really allow the body to rest and kind of, in Ayurveda, we like have all this information about how to, bring in the qualities that, pacify that vata dosha, that excess
Yeah.
air and space, which is dry and light. We want to bring in all those juicy things to help
Mhm.
restore the body to the vitality and, the ojas that was lost or depleted during birth. But
Yeah.
another thing that came up as I was listening to you, that for me over the past, honestly, probably since I became a parent, which was like 19 years ago now, but
Mhm.
how I am able to really also tell what stage of my cycle I'm in by my state of desire. So like
Yeah.
however, like I know, okay, I bet you I'm ovulating or I'm getting close to it because all of a sudden it's far easier for me to, want to be making love. It's just
Yeah.
like my body and my mind, everything is telling me like, go. So
Yes.
for me,
Yes.
that's an indication. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and that brings in a really important piece to this too, is like there are these very like practical ways to know exactly what's going on when. And there's like this is kind of the subtler way of knowing. And that's what becomes really beautiful about this process, where if women feel overwhelmed or confused by the detailed charting practice in the beginning, it's like, can you tap into these different fluctuations of like your desire, of your energy, of I notice one kind of marker of where I am in my cycle is like my ability to handle a stressful situation. Like, you're much more like resilient and hardy in the first half of your cycle. And then once you get deeper into that luteal phase closer to menstruation, it's just like, I just can't handle this right now. And so noticing those little things too. And I think actually like a charting practice can help you notice where those happen in your cycle because you're more aware of where you are all the time.
Totally. And really, a dear friend of mine, uni, who I met through our program, but she did this, she does a lot of different things, but she did this business course where she kind of looks at, those sections of our cycle and like, what are we like most able and ready, and like, where is the flow directed towards during this aspect of our cycle? And I loved so much being able to overlay that awareness onto the things we do every day, such
Yeah.
as how we operate as a professional, and recognizing that like we don't have to like move against the grain. Like we can actually set up our systems to really harness the strengths that we have during each of those sections of our cycle. So maybe this, section where things are just, feeling a little harder, I'm feeling a little bit more tender. Like, let's have this be a more reflective stage. This is maybe where I'm going
Yeah.
to be, you know, reflecting and more internal. So there's like
Yeah.
just so many meaningful shifts that can happen throughout all of the different stages of our lives when we can overlay this like automatic, like inner time clock that's happening.
Yeah.
And how might that expand what's possible during each of those phases and overall?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I think it's so important. I think that's one of the most important aspects of beginning to understand and track your cycle from different lenses is being able to set up your life in a way that, yeah, works with it, isn't pushing against the current. And I think that's especially really great for moms, moms in the postpartum time to be able to like, one of my teachers, Nancy, Lucina, she says that she likes to bring in her whole family on her bleeding time. And so like the whole house kind of follows her rhythm. And so like when mom's bleeding, everyone's kind of like, maybe doing a puzzle quietly or like having quiet time at home. And they kind of all know that like that's their downtime as a family. And it's like, yeah, we can really create these rhythms for ourselves in business and home, to support ourselves. And it's not just like, this trendy thing. It's this like way to actually support your hormones, your physiology, and feel more at ease within yourself. So yeah, I love that too.
Yeah, it really is coming to the root of our humanity. And, I think also about, I have four boys and like they're
Mm,
not going to bleed and have a menstrual cycle. And yet they still have a need for like a cyclical existence. I think that's just
yes.
part of humanity's, what we get here is this benefit of like having seasons for things and times for things and time, time for rest um and also, like, as we move through perimenopause and into like our menopausal years, like this
Yeah.
is not abandoning like the experience of cycle. It's just embodying it in a different way. I'm curious what
Yeah.
your thoughts are on that.
On the perimenopause to menopause
Yeah.
transition.
Mhm.
Yeah, totally. It's so interesting, because this is something that I've heard many times from the traditional Chinese medicine lens. But I was just in a training yesterday, as well, where we were talking a bit about perimenopause into menopause and about how like you continue to cycle, but instead of like your blood and your energy being released, through like from your womb out, through your blood, you then your energy doesn't need to be released. You have this like ability to hold more because you've been really sort of honed by your cycles. And so the energy gets moved into your heart instead. And so that's why you see a lot of women in perimenopause and menopause just being like unapologetically themselves and like showing up in new ways. Or on the shadow side of that, if it's being repressed in their heart, they might close off and get really, internal and insular in that way. But yeah, there is this kind of understanding in TCM specifically that the blood doesn't need to be released anymore, and so your energy center moves from your womb up into your heart. Oh, Christine, I think you're on mute.
Oh, thank you. I recently saw this speaker talking, and I wish I could remember their name, but I don't. But it was talking about how the idea of menopause or the experience of menopause is only shows up in humans and a couple of animals. And so
Yeah,
what was mind-blowing for the speaker is how it's, the humanity's like explaining of how necessary mothering is, how necessary grandmothers are. And when
mhm,
we go through menopause, we're elongating our life by, reducing the wear and the tax on our bodies from constantly, having children or possibility of having children. And so this emphasis on preserving the lives and the longevity of
Mm.
the mother role or the parent, the grandmother, it was
Mm.
so beautiful the way that it was described. And um, yeah, it came up as I was listening to you, and
Mm.
how, those the cycles are not absent, but they're transformed into a way that is also very mysterious and also just stunningly organized by nature.
That's such a good way to put it. Mysterious and stunningly organized by nature. That's exactly it. There's always something that's going to be a little mysterious, even though it's also quite predictable in other ways.
Yeah. And sometimes I'm like, you know what? I don't need to know why. I can just like be in it and marvel,
Yeah.
and experience it and just try to understand. But yeah, it's really a process in all of the stages that brings me into a closer understanding and proximity to my own beingness. And yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So I'm curious, as you have gone through this work with yourself and also with clients, how has sort of your own health unfolded?
Yeah, such a good question. I was thinking that at the beginning. I was like, oh, I didn't say like what happened. Yeah, it took me a little bit to get the hang of cycle tracking, but once I did, it became clear to me when I was ovulating and I started ovulating again. And um, it was a long process. I would say like it's only really, I started that journey like 6 or 7 years ago. And I would say it's only really in the last year that I feel like I'm at like my peak vitality. It took me a little bit. And I had struggled with so many different things. And I had been vegan for 9 years and I had thyroid stuff that I was working through. And now I have regular ovulation. I don't have painful periods, which it shocks me still every time when I get to my period. And it's just kind of like, all right, there's some sensation here, but I'm chill, I'm good, I'm whatever. And it'll still shock me every time when I'm in my luteal phase. I am now, I'm on like day 24 and I feel fine. Like I can still handle life. I don't feel like I have to retreat into a cave and be mad at everyone all the time. And I generally feel like, sometimes in these traditional ways of medicine, like you were saying, like Ayurveda and TCM, there's diagnostics that look beyond sort of the physical things. In TCM, there's this sort of diagnostic of like the brightness in the eyes, and that being a sign of someone's Jing, they're like in innate vitality. And I notice that in myself. Like I notice a brightness in my eyes that didn't used to be there. I notice just a general sense of like I can access my deep inner reserves of peace when I need them. I don't have this like health anxiety or constant fight or flight mode. Like I just feel like I can flow with my cycle. I feel happy. I feel healthy. I feel energetic. Um, and to me, those are the most important markers of health. The pain-free periods are great. The regular cycles that I can, track are great. But for me, the sense of like peace and joy that comes from those things, like that's the real big change that I've noticed and the one that I'm the most grateful for. And the one that I feel the most grateful for and the women I work with as well. I had one client who like very similar. We started working together. She just had a kind of like dull complexion and her eyes were really kind of darkened and she'd kind of like hang her head when we would meet on Zoom and we've been working together for just under a year and I noticed in the last couple months I was like, oh my God, you look bright. You look happy. You're like at peace. She's like smiling and laughing on the call, and it's like, yeah, I can say like, oh, her pain-free periods are gone and she's on a path to conceiving like she wants to. And those are the practical markers, but the quiet peace and joy that I see in someone's eyes and in my own, to me, those are the markers I really look for.
Mm, I love that so much. I could not agree more. That's the whole
Mm.
point, really. All we want is to experience joy and peace,
Yeah.
throughout all the things we do in this life. Um, Thank you so much. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about how you work with people and what this might look like.
Yeah, totally. So, the main part of my practice is my one on one practice. So, I work also under the guidance of my mentor, who is a traditional Chinese medicine doctor. Her name is Kristen Hauser. And so I work within her practice. I take my clients, I see them, and then she gives me feedback as well. So that's just a really nice part of it is you're kind of part of a practice. So you're getting multiple eyes on your case. And so the way that that works is I do virtual sessions over Zoom. The first one is 90 minutes. And we go into all sorts of different things about your health because we're looking for underlying patterns, which is how traditional Chinese medicine works. So I work from that lens. I also work from like a herbal supplement diet, nutritional therapy lens as well. And I bring in those more somatic, emotional parts of womb healing as well. And I usually see women about once a month. It's just session by session, but usually women stay with me for like up to a year, and they come to me for various things, whether it's fertility, whether it's painful periods, a lot of sort of thyroid energy stuff, really any sort of cycle or hormonal imbalance. So that's one way. And then I also have an online course that's called Moon Cycle Mastery. And Moon Cycle Mastery is the complete guide to all of the root causes that I see most commonly in my practice. So it goes everything from setting up your nourishment, your nervous system, education. There's a really big educational component because, again, when you know your patterns, you know how to decode your body, you know what healing steps to take. So Moon Cycle Mastery is a self-paced course. And then I have a membership that meets a couple times a month where women can ask me questions. And if you're in Moon Cycle Mastery or you're a client of mine, you get added to the membership as well. And then, of course, there's my podcast, which is Moon Baby Magic, where I interview women about their blood mysteries, their period and pregnancy and postpartum stories.
Mm. It's just so beautiful to see how our own journeys can propel us forward to follow a calling and create a shift and a change and an opportunity for so many others. And for those of you listening, I will be sure to have all of the ways that we can learn more about Natalie and her work in our show notes here. But I just really want to share appreciation with you for all the things that you're doing, all the people's lives that you're impacting, and for your time today. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much, Christine. It's been so sweet to be on here with you. And I really appreciate the way that you hold this space so deeply and thoughtfully. Your questions and insights. I've really enjoyed connecting with you in this way.
More to come. Thank you, Natalie.
Shanti, Shanti.
The Center for Sacred Window Studies has been training postpartum care providers, professionals who work with new families, and individuals passionate about postpartum care since 2018. We regularly host live free events alongside our online and in-person training and certification programs. Hop on our newsletter list to get direct access to all of our events and community support gatherings. Our mission is not only in training conscious postpartum care providers, but in fostering a robust, informed, and thriving community of postpartum professionals. Once you step inside, you're family forever. Visit www.sacredwindowstudies.com to add your email to our newsletter list. You can support our work by subscribing to the Sacred Window podcast and sharing with someone you know who would love it. Thanks for being here and participating in the culture-wide shift that recognizes the need for and the importance of conscious postpartum care.